At the federal level, Canada's Auditor General has released a report on the government's response to COVID-19. And for a close look at the findings, we're joined live by Rachel Aiello, the senior digital parliamentary reporter for CTV News. Rachel, good to talk to you this afternoon. I've been taking a look at some of your reporting from ctvnews.ca. Some pretty eye-popping numbers in terms of overspending or misspending. How is it being characterized by the Auditor General?
Yeah, Nick. So what the Auditor General has found when she looked into the federal COVID benefits from CERB to the wage subsidy and some others was that because they didn't pre-verify people's eligibility, there is $4.6 billion in overpayments that went to Canadians who weren't eligible, and potentially another over $27 billion that merits further checking up to see whether or not that too didn't go where it was supposed to. Now, kind of in the broader context, over $2.11 billion in COVID spending went out. So while these numbers are significant in the overall percentage, largely what the Auditor General found was that the money went to where it was supposed to, and it did help in Canada's economic recovery, but certainly some tough questions when it comes to the COVID benefits and the decision the government made to just get them out the door as quickly as possible. And now we're having a hard time clawing back some of the stuff that went to people who shouldn't have gotten it.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. That suggests, too, Rachel, that the Auditor General has been able to identify kind of who received the overpayments. Is there any recommendation coming from the AG suggesting that the federal government should be going after the people who, the $4.6 billion that people were, it seems, ineligible for ultimately?
Yeah, so far about $2.3 billion of that has been recovered, but that is because Canadians were made aware that they were given overpayments and kind of voluntarily had to go back to the CRA and offer it up. But there is a tight timeline now, Nick, on them getting the rest of this money back and even doing this further deep dive into that other $27 billion, because in the legislation there's about a 36-month period before it's unfair for the federal government to go back to Canadians and ask for that money to be given back. So there is pressure on them now to act on this, and as well in the other report, pressure on the government to make sure that the overdose of vaccine doses that they have in their stockpile don't go to waste.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's the other side to this, is the procurement side of this. What did the Auditor General find on that?
So largely, she found that the Canadian government made the right call in making multiple vaccine contracts, knowing full well that we could have a surplus of doses. We got those doses into Canada. We were able to get the vaccines out to everyone that wanted them. But the issue came with once that kind of excess stockpile arrived in the country, what happened with it. She found that there was data sharing issues between the federal government and the provinces, trying to use a program that wasn't quite fully set up to track expiry dates. And so now, Nick, we're looking at about 32 million doses that are set to expire by the end of the year. Complicating this is we now have bivalent doses that are likely getting prioritized, and the market for global donations seems to be largely saturated.
Okay, so what is the response then from the Liberal government at this point to this?
So far, what we've heard is that they are accepting the report's findings, they're working on things. But Nick, we hear this every time an Auditor General report comes forward. The government promises to change things, and what we noticed today is there was flaws pointed out to the Public Health Agency over decades that were at issue in this COVID vaccine procurement that still haven't been resolved. So jury's out on what will change going forward. But certainly there's also going to be pressure from the opposition parties to see the government follow through on correcting some of the errors that the AG has pointed out.
Yeah, that'll be interesting too, because that was going to be my next question, Rachel, is, Pierre Poilievre, the new leader of the official opposition, he's spoken out against, in some cases, some of those, CERB payments or benefit payments to Canadians during the pandemic. Any official response from Poilievre at this point?
Not that we've seen, but all eyes are going to be on question period to see what comes there. There will be a reaction from opposition critics shortly, if not already. And so we'll be keeping an eye on that. But absolutely, the Conservatives are the most critical about the government giving out these tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in COVID benefits. And now that there might be this large chunk of money that they aren't able to recover, there's certainly going to be more pressure from the Conservatives to get that money back. They're saying overall, this COVID benefit spending exacerbated inflation. Canadians are feeling that cost of living crunch as a result. And certainly now that we've got some concrete figures behind it, it's going to be an interesting conversation, I think, in the House later today.
Yeah, $4.6 billion, Rachel. Okay, that's Rachel Aiello, senior digital parliamentary reporter at CTV News, joining us from Ottawa. Appreciate this, Rachel. Thanks for the breakdown.
Of course.